think everyone is entitled to their own opinion, definitely. And being a public figure, my results are out there, my games.
She said 2 words and broke the entire internet. The Alex Eala moment nobody saw coming.
I think everyone is entitled to their own opinion, definitely. And being a public figure, my results are out there, my games are out there. It's inevitable that
2 words. That is all it took. 2 words from a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines, delivered with the kind of ice-cold composure that most seasoned veterans could only dream of. And suddenly the entire internet stopped what it was doing and stared. Sports channels replayed the clip on a loop, TikTok exploded, comment sections filled up faster than anyone could keep up with, and millions of people who had never watched a single tennis match in their lives suddenly found themselves completely obsessed with one name, Alex Eala. Now, if you already know who she is, buckle up, because we are about to go deeper than any highlight reel has ever taken you. And if you are just now hearing that name for the first time, consider yourself incredibly lucky, because you are about to discover the most electrifying story in sports right now. And trust us when we tell you, by the time this video is done, you are going to feel like you have been sleeping on the greatest show on earth. Let us start from the very beginning, because the viral moment, as jaw-dropping as it was, is only the tip of a very large and very remarkable iceberg. Picture the scene. The stadium lights blazing, cameras rolling. A young player standing courtside fresh off an emotionally charged performance, still catching her breath from everything she had just given out there on the court. On the surface, it looked like every post-match interview you have ever seen before. Player walks up, reporter asks questions. Player gives composed and gracious answers. Rinse and repeat. The template has existed for decades, and almost nobody ever deviates from it, because deviating feels dangerous, because speaking your truth in those moments carries real professional risk, because the unwritten rule of elite sports media is that athletes smile, they thank their opponents, and they keep the complicated stuff tucked safely out of view. Alex Eala clearly did not get that memo. What happened in the moments leading up to the 2 words that broke the internet was something that billions of people across the world recognize immediately, even if they have never stood on a tennis court in their lives. Everything started normally enough. Alex was composed, gracious, and articulate, handling each question with a maturity that seemed almost impossible for someone her age. She spoke about the match intelligently. She gave credit where it was due. She was, by every reasonable measure, the perfect interview subject. But then the reporter began steering the conversation somewhere uncomfortable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the focus shifted. Not toward her game, not toward her performance, not toward her remarkable journey. Instead, attention crept toward the way she spoke, the way certain words sounded when they came out of her mouth. And in that moment, the entire atmosphere of the interview changed, even if most people in the stadium had not quite clocked it yet. There is a specific feeling that people who have lived this experience understand in their bones. It is the feeling of someone laughing a half-second too long after you speak, the feeling of a smile that carries just a little too much of the wrong kind of amusement, the uncomfortable realization that you are no longer being admired, you are being quietly judged, and the condescension is wrapped so politely that challenging it feels almost impossible without looking like the difficult one. It is the kind of micro moment that billions of people across the world have swallowed silently for years. In classrooms, in offices, in meeting rooms, at dinner tables. The student who pauses before pronouncing a word because they are terrified of being mocked. The immigrant professional who rehearses sentences 3 times in their head before speaking them aloud in a meeting because they know one wrong syllable and suddenly their intelligence gets quietly questioned. The person who carries an accent as the most visible badge of their courage, having learned an entirely different language and conquered it, only to have someone reduce that achievement to entertainment. Alex Eala felt all of it in that moment. And unlike the vast majority of people who have stood in that exact same emotional space, she did not swallow it. She simply looked forward and said it, short, sharp, delivered with absolutely zero panic and absolute maximum effect. And in the seconds that followed, the entire stadium seemed to hold its breath collectively, because nobody, not the reporter, not the fans, not the millions who would later watch the clip, was prepared for that level of composure wrapped around that level of directness from a 20-year-old who had everything to lose and chose honesty anyway. The internet did not just react, it detonated. Within minutes, the clip was spreading simultaneously across every platform that exists. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, X. Sports channels picked it up. News channels picked it up. Content creators who had never once discussed tennis in their lives were breaking it down frame by frame, analyzing every micro-expression, every pause, every millisecond of the silence that followed before the crowd found its voice again. And then, something extraordinary happened. The conversation escaped the world of tennis entirely and became something much, much bigger. Because here is the thing about Alex Eala that the viral clip only scratched the surface of. She is not simply a promising young athlete. She is, at 20 years old, one of the most popular players in the entire sport of tennis right now, drawing massive crowds of fans, many attending their very first tennis event in their lives, to tournaments all over the world. ESPN, she became the highest-ranking Filipino player in history, the first from the Philippines to reach a WTA final, and the first player representing her country to win a Grand Slam match in the Open era. ESPN. She did all of this as a 20-year-old from a nation where, not very long ago, the idea of producing a globally recognized professional tennis player felt closer to fantasy than reality. There are 115 million Filipinos, and she is the first tennis player in history to reach this level. Clay, let that sit for a moment, because that number is staggering and the weight of what it means is almost impossible to fully comprehend from the outside. Her breakout moment arrived at the Miami Open, where she entered as a wild card ranked 140th in the world and proceeded to dismantle a parade of Grand Slam champions, including Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and world number 2 Iga Swiatek, all in straight sets, on her way to the semifinals. Olympics, that run did not just put her on the map, it blew the map apart and replaced it with something new. She brought an entirely new audience to tennis all around the world. Inquirer.net, courts back home in the Philippines started filling up. Kids who had never once considered picking up a racket began dreaming differently. A day-in-the-life video posted by the BNP Paribas Open became the most viewed content in the tournament's history, and she has nearly 1 million followers on Instagram, more than double that of many higher-ranked players on the tour. ESPN, she is not just winning matches. She is building a movement. And this is the part of the story that gives the viral interview moment its full and proper weight. Because when you understand everything Alex Eala has been through to stand in that stadium, the 2 words she delivered do not sound like an impulsive reaction from a young athlete caught in an uncomfortable moment. They sound like the emotional release of years of sacrifice, quiet pressure, and extraordinary resilience that had been building beneath the surface long before any camera ever caught it. She grew up in a country with almost no professional tennis infrastructure to support her ambitions. There was no model to follow, no player who had exceeded internationally before her, no established pathway laid out and waiting. Clay, she spent years living away from home, adapting to unfamiliar cultures and unfamiliar competitive environments, training in conditions far removed from those enjoyed by many of her rivals, fighting through doubt from people who quietly assumed that someone from the Philippines could only go so far in a sport built around countries with far deeper resources and far longer traditions. She reached the world number 2 junior ranking and became the first Filipino to win a junior major title at the 2022 U.S. Open, where she addressed the crowd in Tagalog in a speech that itself went viral. ESPN. She was 16 years old. 16 years old, standing on one of the biggest stages in the sport, and instead of shrinking in the spotlight, she leaned into her identity with everything she had. That is not an accident. That is not luck. That is a young woman who made a conscious decision, very early in her career, to never apologize for who she is or where she comes from. And that decision runs like a thread through every single moment of her story, including the one in the interview that sent the internet into meltdown. What made the reaction to the clip so enormous was not just that she responded. Plenty of athletes have pushed back against disrespect over the years. What made it extraordinary was how she responded. There was no trembling voice, no emotional collapse, no panic spreading across her face. She remained completely present, completely controlled, completely grounded, and delivered exactly what she felt in that moment, with a precision and composure that elite athletes spend years trying to develop in far higher stakes situations on the court. People who had watched her tennis already knew that mental toughness was one of her defining qualities, but seeing it operate off the court, in an unexpected and genuinely uncomfortable situation, in front of live cameras and a stadium full of people, that is what took the clip from viral moment to global conversation. And the conversation that followed went places that no sports interview clip usually goes. Suddenly people from Indonesia, India, Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico, Poland, and dozens of other countries were flooding comment sections with their own stories. Stories about learning a second language and being mocked for the way it sounded. Stories about sitting in classrooms praying nobody called on them because the pronunciation might not be perfect. Stories about building careers in countries far from home while silently absorbing the quiet indignity of being reduced to an accent rather than respected for their knowledge, their work, and their intelligence. One comment spread nearly as fast as the clip itself, and it captured something that millions of people have felt for years without ever finding quite the right words for it. Having an accent means you learned another language. That is not weakness. That is intelligence. That sentence gathered hundreds of thousands of likes within hours because it said something true that needed saying, and Alex Eala's two-word response had created the space for it to be said. This is the point where the story becomes something genuinely historic, because what Alex Eala did in that moment was much bigger than a viral clip, much bigger than a tennis interview, and much bigger than any individual athlete's personal reaction to a single uncomfortable situation. She exposed a conversation that the global sports world has been quietly avoiding for years. The uncomfortable reality that athletes from non-English-speaking countries do not always receive the same level of respect and professionalism in media spaces that athletes from Western nations receive almost automatically. That accents can quietly become punchlines. That pronunciation can become a distraction that steals attention away from actual achievement. That athletes from certain backgrounds have historically been expected to absorb a certain level of subtle condescension as part of the invisible tax they pay simply for existing at the highest level of international sport. Most athletes have chosen silence because silence feels safer, because speaking up carries the risk of being labeled difficult, oversensitive, or unprofessional. Alex Eala chose something different. And here is the beautiful part of what happened next. Once the clip spread and the debate erupted and the entire internet started talking, people began getting curious about who she actually was. They started searching her name, watching old interviews, reading about her journey, discovering the history-making moments, the demolished Grand Slam champions, the packed stadiums, the Philippines falling in love with tennis for the very first time because of one young woman's refusal to accept that the doors of this sport were not built for people who look like her and come from where she comes from. At the Australian Open this year, despite being ranked only 49th in the world and appearing in the main draw for the very first time, she was coronated by the sheer force of the crowds who showed up for her as the most popular player in tennis right now. Ben Rothenberg, not the best ranked, not the most decorated, the most popular, the one that people cannot stop watching, cannot stop talking about, cannot stop showing up for, in massive, flag-waving, chant-singing numbers that make even experienced reporters stop and look around in genuine disbelief. She has said she wants to win Grand Slams and become world number one, and she says it not as a wish, but as a plan. Olympics, she speaks about her ambitions, with the same calm certainty that she deployed in that interview, with the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who has already done things that nobody believed were possible, and is not even close to finished yet. She cites Sharapova's aggression and mental toughness as one inspiration. She cites Li Na, the trailblazing Asian champion, as another. She carries the legacy of Manny Pacquiao's fighting spirit somewhere in her DNA, understanding what it means to represent an entire nation's dreams on the biggest stages in the world. She has said she only dreamed of making tennis grow in the Philippines, and now she is bringing a whole new audience to the sport all around the world. That is the full story behind two words that shut the internet down. Not an impulsive moment from a young athlete who lost her composure. Not a controversy designed for clicks. The visible, undeniable, absolutely inevitable result of everything this extraordinary young woman has been building, fighting for, refusing to abandon, and quietly becoming for her entire life. She did not just respond to a reporter. She responded for every person who ever stayed silent when they should have spoken. For every student who swallowed humiliation in a classroom. For every immigrant professional who rehearsed sentences in their head before meetings. For every athlete who was expected to smile and take it because their passport came from the wrong place. She spoke, and millions of people who needed to hear that response felt something shift inside them. That is rare. That is powerful. And that is why Alex Eala is not just the most exciting story in tennis right now. She might just be the most exciting story in sports, full stop. Now, we want to hear from you, and we mean that. Drop a comment below and tell us the first moment you heard the name Alex Eala. Or if this is your very first time, tell us what you think after hearing this story. We are building a community here of people who care about the real stories, the human moments, the history being made in real time, and your voice belongs in this conversation. If this video hit differently, and you want more stories told exactly like this one, smash that like button right now because it genuinely helps more people find this channel and discover stories that deserve to be told. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do it right now and turn on the notifications because we promise you the best content is still ahead. Do not miss it. We will see you in the next one.